This is the Team Objection podcast for August 19th, 2021, episode 495, and we're getting back to our roots. It felt like there was a time there, which was pretty much before the Suns started their playoff run, where we talked about video games for like 6 straight weeks, and maybe it was too much. And then, because the Suns pretty much encompassed all of our spare time, we didn't talk about them almost at all for a long time. So it is back. The entire show almost is devoted to it. We're just going to kind of run down some of the things that we're into right now. We can maybe give us a quick score to things that we finished, or at least just kind of like a recommendation, and then some things that are in progress. I put it in a weird order. I put Dave first so that he can get made fun of as quickly as possible and then be sad.
This is what people come for.
Yeah, and then Shaun second, and me last for some reason.
See, Dave has been dreading this week because he thinks he's just going to get ripped to shreds. But I'm confident nothing will happen that will undermine his games or his decisions in any way, at any point.
I don't believe you at all. I find it funny. There was a clear time mark for me where I hadn't played like a video game for almost 2 months straight, and it was basically coinciding with the Suns making the playoffs. And then as soon as the finals are over, I got a PlayStation 5. I'm like, well, I guess now I know what I'm doing with my free time.
Mm-hmm. And a bunch opened up. How coincidental.
And what are you playing on that PlayStation 5? Awesome next-gen experiences?
Well, no, because there isn't any. There hasn't been any awesome next-gen experiences available. I mean,
this is not true. I've already recommended to you some great games.
You've recommended a couple. And so, anyway. Well, I haven't played those yet. I'm going to be. Don't worry. But video games that I've been playing, if you can call it that, is what. So I've played a couple. You went back.
I don't know what happened. It's fine.
So I've been playing. I would say I've just finished one, and now I've got kind of 3 games that's kind of in my queue right now that I've been playing. NBA 2K21 I've been playing because it is kind of the only next-gen game I have at the moment, and that's even next-gen in quotes because it's kind of not. 2K22 probably would be the real next-gen game. But other than that, I've been playing Super Smash Bros. On the Switch, which has been fun because my son actually loves that game, and so I've been trying to play with him a little bit.
Is he really good?
Is he really good?
Yeah. Is your son like one of these like savants that like little kid gamers like always inevitably are these days?
No, he's not there yet, but he's also only 5. So I think by the time he's like 7, he will be because he's just working on his hand-eye coordination and getting better and better. I mean, the mere fact that he can handle knows the moves on there and knows what a smash attack is, knows like what the special attack is, and knows that different characters have these different moves and what those moves are is pretty impressive for a 5-year-old. So
yeah, I was having my uncle jump over pits for me in the first levels of Mario when I was a kid. So that's quite a jump.
I mean, he's still playing like on the computer's only on like level 2, so he's not really stretching himself thin, but he wins most of the time, and I'm not good at Smash Brothers. He hasn't beaten me, but he can get me some hits in on me. So,
I mean, when Emily was about his age, I just gave her an unplugged controller and let her think that she was playing. So he's doing better than that.
I do that with James now with my almost 2-year-old. I'm just like, you know what? Here, James, you can hold these broken controllers and you go nuts, kid. But what I've actually been playing lately is. I just beat Detroit Become Human, which is why that's pictures on the screen now. Interesting experience. And then I was trying to play Beyond Two Souls, which is all under the same developer, makes that Quantic Dream, makes those games. I am a fan of those games because I really enjoy story and the interactive movie sense of it. How gameplay actually comes is kind of lower on my list as far as what I look for in a game. Although I acknowledge the flaws that come with those types of games, like namely quick time events, because they're annoying as hell.
Yeah, I mean, you just pretty much said it. Like, I mean, my problem with the David Cage game, let's start here. First of all, it would be great. Walking Dead is an example of these games. All the Telltale games did this, and I love the Walking Dead series. I love The Wolf Among Us, especially. Like, those are all great. Even though So, Dave, let me back up. Let me give you a history lesson. Resident Evil 4. I knew you know this because you played it, but it was not the first game to do QuickTime events, but it was maybe one of the first that was so lauded, and QuickTime events were a big part of that. And people were just amazed by the control at the time. This was their perspective that you could take over the cutscenes. And so it started making its way into games like this, where it's like, we're going to make the whole thing. It's like an interactive movie. The problem with the David Cage games, I don't think the stories have been especially good. And that's an opinion thing. QuickTime events have decayed very quickly for me because they are asking the gamer to actually, in some ways, take their attention off of the scene. So rather than getting more control of the scene, you're so worried about when is a button gonna pop up or hammering triangle or whatever the case might be. It's actually just more distracting.
Yep.
And so it runs counterintuitive to the idea of an interactive movie to start with. And so I think it's just a very poor mechanic in a game now. And I kind of hate them now. And there are other Telltale games where I trust them on a storytelling level. Batman, good example. I bet you it's great, but I can't get myself to play those games. Like, it takes a lot for me to like get over that hurdle of the gameplay.
So I feel like I can get over the QuickTime events hurdle because I agree with you in the sense that it does remove me from the scene. Like too often I'm looking at the bottom of the screen trying to look for where the QuickTime event is. I'm trying to make sure that I do the right thing. Beyond Two Souls is the worst actually QuickTime thing I've ever seen, because the QuickTime stuff you have to do in that is move your joystick, your right thumbstick, towards the direction. Like if you're trying to punch somebody, if you're punching with your right hand, you have to move your joystick to the right. But sometimes it's mirrored, and so you think you need to push it to the left, even though it's your right-hand swing, and then it's like, and you miss it. I've missed it so frequently in Beyond Two Souls, to the point I'm like, this is really stupid, and I'm actually really frustrated with this, even though it's kind of an intriguing game. I understand the reason for QuickTime events, because otherwise you basically just do have an interactive movie, which I'm not against myself, but I could see a lot of people complaining, being like, all you do is walk around and talk to people, how boring. But one thing that Detroit did really well in tying in with the Android aspect of that I loved was the interaction with your environment. You kind of had like a scanning ability, and that was more important than the QuickTime events almost. That and the dialogue together made that more of an interactive movie with some gameplay, because you had to kind of like search out things, find evidence, scan things. If you didn't do that, if you didn't find certain things, it would absolutely affect your play down the road. So a single playthrough of Detroit was actually a very short game, but there's so many branching paths that it kind of made it have some replayability and fun.
Yeah, that's the part where, I mean, they've effectively stolen that from Phoenix Wright, but those, and Telltale has had plenty of those as well. I mean, even in Walking Dead. I don't know that I can remember any like story consequences from not examining an item in Walking Dead, because most of the time you were required to find them to advance anyways. The second season started to dabble with it a little bit, like there was a picture of Kenny's family and some other stuff. But nonetheless, I think it's interesting because at least those kind of work. When you get to explore and you feel like you're part of the environment, I'm sure the idea was then, well, that's not going to be exciting enough for some gamers. So they wanted to put in the action sequences. And if you're not going to build a full-on gameplay model, QuickTime events are about the only choice you have, right? I'm sort of with Shaun on this, though, where I watched somebody else play Batman, which I think was actually pretty good. I mean, Telltale's quality dipped a little bit, I think, after Tales from the Borderlands. I think there was a couple other projects, like Back to the Future, where you're like, okay, now we're just throwing this into IPs however we can, right? But I thought the Batman one was actually pretty well done, but I didn't want to play it myself. I was quite content to watch a YouTube playthrough of it, and then whatever choices they made, I was just like, well, I don't know if I would have done that, but I'm okay with it because I don't want to do it myself.
Well, the biggest problem with the choices that you make in a lot of those games is the illusion of choice. It ends up not really making a difference.
Yeah.
Which
and that's okay. Like,
yeah.
I get that, and it would be nice if it mattered, but I do understand to the extent Walking Dead Season 1, for example, I made my Lee exactly how I wanted him, even though it didn't drastically change any endings. The fact that I got to set the tone meant a lot to me. So that was like, okay, but I do understand, like, yeah, if you're going to have all these choices, if you're going to pretend that they mean something, it almost feels like you're being dishonest. And that I like less.
Mm-hmm.
See, and that's my biggest praise of Detroit Become Human is that because it's the newest game in this series, you can see how your choices make a difference. Beyond Two Souls doesn't really have this, but because of the branching aspects of that, if you lose a character, or you have a character die, or you go a certain path, it branches out so deeply that it really does affect how your gameplay is. It affects your ending. It affects everything. There's scenes that many people don't even see because if you don't pick this choice or even succeed at this QuickTime event, you can have QuickTime events that you don't do, and you do not have access to an entire branch of a game. It is amazing how much that has branched. So it does feel like your choices have consequences and make a difference, unlike other games in this genre before.
I sort of wish these could have existed in a time before the internet. And,
Yeah.
Storytelling and just video games in general have advanced leaps and bounds in the last 30 years, so it's almost impossible to not tie those together. But man, I wish you could just play it and have your own experience be your own and then not be concerned with what everybody else got or to see all the paths available to you. Now, I like what Detroit did as far as showing you that just so you could see kind of what was there. But with the illusion gone, all you end up having is frustrated gamers on both sides. Some of them are going to be frustrated if a character does die or have a meaningful consequence, and then that locks them out of potential story. Others are going to be frustrated if you give that illusion and then it means nothing, like what happened at the end of Walking Dead Season 2 into Season 3, where the end of 2 was like this huge pivotal choice between two characters who've been around for quite some time, and it was immediately erased by the first scene of 3. To where you were like, well, okay, but now that means any gravity that the second game had at the end is meaningless. So all you did was undercut your own storytelling. It's like, I don't know how you strike the balance. I'm not a solution guy on this, but I see why players are sometimes annoyed with these types of games.
Well, it's hard for developers to get behind that because you basically have to write 3 games, three games or 3 endings of games where 50%, 33% of your audience is never going to see it. And like nobody wants to get behind that because it's like, hey, if we spend all this time and money, we want people to see it. We want to make it worthwhile. So that's why we kind of have one company that does it, kind of.
I think my issue, my only main frustration was I have all these games that are like masterpieces that I want you to play. Really, really good recommendations. And you were like, no, I'm playing Detroit Become Human. That's like
So you have these masterpieces by your standards. And yes, I know there's critically acclaimed and stuff like that, but like the problem is what I enjoy as far as a game goes may not be the same as what you enjoy as a game. As far as gameplay, I have a harder time going through in games where I just have to swing a sword. And I understand there's story behind it, there's great aspects of it that's great. But like that is not something that I enjoy as much.
I'm sorry. Who recommended God of War to you?
That was one that I had to work over the fact of the gameplay of it because it wasn't as fun gameplay.
I think in general your recommendations are good. I don't know if Returnal's a good fit for him. I think at the very least he would need to try like a Hades first, and if he likes just that kind of gameplay loop, then maybe Returnal as well. But like I'm excited to play Returnal. I think it's going to be a great fit for me. Dave lasted about 45 minutes in a Dark Souls game, and I'm not saying those are the same, but they're also not that different.
They're pretty different, though, for a few different reasons. But
I think they're almost different in a worse way. If it's only about the gameplay and it's an action loop and Dave's not enjoying his time with it, he's going to check out.
There is a story. It's not like God of War, where it's like there's heavy emphasis on character development and things like that. But, I think you would like it. But I don't often recommend, because I don't really like those types of games either, where like all you're doing is slashing a sword and there is a story, but it's kind of in the background. I mean, honestly, Legend of Zelda, if it wasn't for the pedigree and like the puzzles and how well they do that, I don't know if I would necessarily be a fan either, but I think they do that part really well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Masterpiece is not just like I played a game. I think you'd really like it. Pretty much everything I've recommended to you is like really good reviews. And you played so little, I can still recommend things that are getting like 10s across the board in the industry.
Yeah. For lack of a better word, I don't care how good of a rating it gets necessarily. It may be a good way to make me find something, but that doesn't mean it's always going to resonate with me. And that's not a slight on you or any reviewer. It's probably a lot of people enjoy it, but I don't know.
Wait until you play a game that I recommend that you hate, and then we can we can have this conversation.
I don't think I've had a game that I've hated. Maybe some games haven't grabbed me. I mean, Mass Effect Andromeda was like, ugh, okay, I may have not playing this, but I don't think
absolutely did not recommend that to you.
No, you didn't recommend it. I just wanted to try to get in the pedigree of the series.
Yeah,
and
I get that.
I mean, as much as we all loved Mass Effect, we
Yeah.
all tried to see the best in Andromeda, and it didn't see the best in us.
Yeah. So,
with that said, Dave, you probably should play Until Dawn, even though I've taken all this time telling you to get away from the genre. I think it's a better, more polished David Cage game that's not David Cage. It is that like immersive, interactive movie thing, but it's like a horror. But it's really good and fun, and there's certain like secrets to find, and you can go back if you really care to like butterfly moments, and you can like revisit moments earlier and see what would diverge. And
yeah, I also feel like Life is Strange might be something that Dave enjoys more than you or I might. Similar reasons,
I never
to be
played
honest.
it, but yeah.
I will have to throw out the issues that I've come to realize with the writing in Detroit Become Human, and I think that's it sucks because I don't know how you could avoid it somewhat because of the parallels that are going to be drawn, but it could have been done in a much less clunky way. How's that?
Yeah, I think David Cage is not subtle in his storytelling.
No, and that's his biggest issue.
He's also an asshole by all accounts. But the biggest problem with Detroit Become Human was it was like David Cage going, aha, I will tell this story and it'll be better than the civil rights movement. And you're like, I don't know if you should even be trying to accomplish that, let alone you try to accomplish that.
I feel like if he could give up his ego on that and like, here's my idea for a story. Here's the ideas. Here's the branches. Because the ideas I like a lot. I love the world that was built there.
Yeah.
And how it kind of all fit in. And then if you could have somebody come in and be like, let's change this, just punch it up a little bit, like make it so that it's not going to offend people or draw really bad parallels in something that actually, in a way, there needs to be some parallels, but let's make them less clunky.
Even in advance, because Cage is so terrible at writing female characters, everybody was kind of on their guard because they're like, well, if he can't write women, is he going to be able to do it with effectively black people in his game? And the answer was, no, not really. But that's okay.
I'm still bitter that every game we've recommended that Dave has played, he's loved. But then he comes back and it's like, you just have to understand, sometimes your recommendations suck.
I didn't say that. I said no such thing like
That's what
that.
I heard.
Yeah, we have it on camera. I mean,
I said nothing along those lines.
The audio,
and I was weird how you changed
the camera.
that.
Okay, it's my turn. Yeah, I have some pretty controversial stuff myself. I want to start by saying I'm playing through the great Ace Attorney Chronicles.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost brought this up in the last section, but it goes a lot better here. I watched someone play the first case, and I was like, this is boring. And I knew the game wasn't boring. I just don't like watching people play games, it turns out. So I know this is like a huge movement, and I guess this makes me sound really old because it's very hip right now. I don't get it. I can't. You take the control away from me, and it is just super boring. Whereas once I get my hands on it, the game is really solid so far.
I do think that is maybe the worst possible game to watch on YouTube, which is why you should go check out our playthrough of it on our channel right now. Kidding aside, though, I mean, when you really boil down what Ace Attorney games are, there's really so little that you're doing that I can't even imagine it in the hands of somebody else.
Yeah.
Well, now, I think overall you're still going to say this about other types of games too, but I was actually thinking about this where I was like, this is not a game I would watch a Let's Play of myself because at the end of the day, you're basically making like 10 choices per case. I have to present this evidence at this time. And yeah, you're pressing, you're feeling around, you're figuring things out. Like there's a puzzle element that you're solving, but when you actually think about what you're doing in a gameplay perspective, it's so minimal.
Yeah. Well, and I will say to, plug your guys' thing, you're actually talking. And your commentary, I think, would go a long way to making that more entertaining. The one that I was watching was just like, here's the playthrough. Because that's what I wanted at the time. I just wanted to see what it was like because I didn't think we were ever going to get it.
Some people do. And then in games like voiced cutscenes and whatnot, I can definitely understand. But here where it's just the like bleeps and bloops, like how can you not talk during that? Like, it would be so boring.
Yeah. But I would say it's definitely in the top third of Ace Attorney games that I played. I think the music is great. They do some new gameplay features. Like it's funny that you're not my beef with the Ace Attorney series is I want to be in the courthouse and I could care very less for everything else that's not in court. And they amend that this time because you take part in the investigation and these like what does he call them? Logic and reasoning specials from Herlock Sholmes, which is so stupid. Which still gives me what I like in the case, but just like outside of the courtroom. So that's been great. Again, the music is just phenomenal. And I think the characters are really strong. I don't actually think the cases themselves, like the plotting and the pacing, have been all that amazing, but the characters have been really great. And so that's enough to get me through it.
Yeah, I can't speak to them in more detail because there's a Michaela that would overhear, but I sort of agree with you. There's a couple of premises where I'm like, even by Ace Attorney standards, I can't help but roll my eyes. And I'm like, well, I love this series. I'm along for the ride. You don't have to sell me. That said, I'm also not just going to lap this up like some eager dog. So I'm like, I could do without a couple of these being the way they were.
Especially in the first case, which is like, this in some way sets the tone for the rest of the game. You're just like, fucking what? What happened here?
I have less of a problem with that than I do either of the cases that follow it.
It reminds me of the first case I ever played in the first game, where it's just like, your justice system is set up on what now?
Yeah.
Well, that's not even like...
Yeah, we've gone light years beyond that, which is still true. And there's still times where you're like, wait, what? If I'm a defense attorney, I don't have to find out who's guilty. I just have to tell you that my client's not fucking...
Yeah.
You can't execute him. That's all we're worried about right now. To prove that he's innocent, I don't have to show you who did it.
Exactly.
Chris, I think that you did this crime. Well, I'm going to prove that he didn't. Well, you didn't tell me who did, so kill Chris.
Now you know, because the series has trained you, like the guilty party is somewhere, and you've probably met them already. And every case is like that. Someone that you've met by the end of it is going to be the guilty party.
It's Shaun. Shaun killed him.
And there are witnesses that are just outright lying on the stand, and you're just supposed to go along with that idea. And then you prove without a shadow of a doubt that they're lying, and the judge is like, all right, young man, I'm going to need you to testify again, but this time. And you're like, what the fuck again? You're in jail. You're going to jail for perjury forever.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Well, and what's really bad is then they reference perjury.
Yeah, and it doesn't help. We talked about that in our playthrough. Yeah.
So now you've shown you're aware of it.
And then it still happens in that same case.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyways, I love the series and I'm enjoying my time with it because I'm not going to talk about it in my section. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm on the final case now of the first game and it's good.
Yeah, I like it a lot. So Cyberpunk was the main one that I wanted to play though, because as everybody, even Dave knows, like what a train wreck this launch was for like a litany of reasons. We spent an episode on it. I won't get into it here, but like disaster. Chances are high you, the listener / viewer, know exactly what I'm talking about. So I had a lot of hesitancy and trepidation in playing it, but I was like, I have an Xbox Series X. I don't have a lot of games to play on that console that are like really worth it. I know the Cyberpunk was sort of optimized for next gen. I was waiting for a patch that was going to be like, here's the definitive patch, everything's clean. And it sounds like I don't know if that's ever coming. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to bite the bullet. I'm going to be aware. I'm probably going to get some side quests that are that get bugged, like to fail states. I'm not going to be able to get through it because something's not going to load, and you know, that's okay. I'm going to go into it with that prepared. I have had a great time. It's really good. It's an excellent game. And more importantly, in some ways, I've had no game-breaking bugs. It's janky as hell. Things like the way, if I had to describe the biggest issue, the way things connect to each other just isn't real strong. So, like, you'll get cars flying sometimes. You'll also get cars in the road. And like people carrying a gun like in their wrist and like walking around, and so that's not great. But I've never been like the super immersive person. Like when I play a game, I imagine I'm in the world. It's like so that's not a deal breaker for me. But it's everything I love in that like first person RPG game. I love the progression system. I love the side quests. I just did a side quest. This is like a barometer for me where there was no action whatsoever. I was attending a funeral. That was all that there was to it. And Grand Theft Auto Dave, you'll know this, has trained me to think like, okay, when is the mafia gonna show
Where's it
up
coming?
and start? Nothing. You just have a nice moment, like, and there's a lot of different quests like that where you want to learn about the characters. Here, go do this side quest, and and then that's it. And that's what Witcher did as well, and it's great, and it's interesting, and for the most part, it's well written. They try to be a little like edgelord, I think sometimes, like everything has to be like fucking tits, and like, come on, like we can be a little bit more mature on the writing, but they do nail those moments too. Keanu Reeves is mostly delightful in his role because he's like, I'm early on in the game, but he's kind of adversarial in some ways, and then I think that can change depending on some decisions you make. But it's just been really good. I've liked it a lot.
This is a game that I actually am very interested in playing. Have been, and then I heard so many terrible things about it. But when you tell me things like there's there's a side quest in which you just have to attend a funeral, like I don't know why that interests me, but it does. Like,
Yeah.
maybe it's because I do kind of like a little bit more of this immersive thing, and I understand the needs of stories to have conflicts and things to do and things go wrong because that's how conflict is made. But there's something that's always attracted me to. I've built this world. Here's some normal things that happen in this world. It
Exactly.
immerses me in that world so much more, and I appreciate stories that are willing to do that, even though I feel like the general populace is like, well, that was boring. And I don't know, I like it.
I love that, and like there's so many conversations have like a bunch of different branches to go down, which I love too.
Mm-hmm.
The action when it does happen is very, I mean, I think it's well done. I'm sure you're gonna get like Call of Duty pros that are like, the shooting's not great, and maybe that's true, but like it's good enough for me, someone where the gameplay is sort of secondary for me. Like I really want to be there for the stories and the leveling up and that kind of stuff. So to that end, I've had a really good time, despite me thinking it was going to be kind of awful.
Yeah, and as I think about open world RPGs in general, I'm like, man, when have I ever liked the shooting? Like GTA, never. Red Dead, no. What else? I guess like a bow and arrow in Skyrim, but that's not gunplay, which, to your point, is a little bit more precise in some other types of games. But I'm like, that's not why I'm here. And then Mass Effect, I mean, the weapons were fine, and there was a nice variety to them, but I was mostly there for the different powers and stuff.
Yeah.
And I cared about that game's action a lot more, even though I also enjoyed the story in the trilogy. That was more like, okay, well, this gameplay is also neat. So I was there for both. I don't really go into a game like Cyberpunk and I'm like, I'm going to play this because I like shooting from cover.
Yeah,
exactly. Which is why I can't get into Gears of War, because I'm like, not only do I not like the gameplay, but I find the story to be boring as fuck. So like, why am I here?
Yep.
There's something about, maybe it's because I'm bad at it, but like something like Call of Duty or just a game that is derived purely from shooting, it's not fun. Like, great, I shot him, cool. Like, boring. Like, it gets so old so fast.
Well, and then that's the thing. Again, like I know, Dave, you like Grand Theft Auto a lot, and overall, I think 5 was solid. Mm-hmm. But that's a game where, to your point about like the world building, it's like that trains you. You can't walk around the corner without some gangbanger like trying to blow you away. It's like, no, sometimes like things happen to just explore characters, and like conversations can be. A good conversation can be, and this is like a literature thing, but a good conversation can be as compelling as any big action set piece.
That was the greatest thing about Grand Theft Auto 5. Red Dead Redemption 2 was the reason I like that the most, because it was a world. They built a world. It's why I like the games that I like for the most part, is when you build a world and you follow the rules of it. I love it.
And my favorite moments from those are the quieter ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mass Effect is an example of that too.
Yeah, I don't really remember things as far as action sequences from those games. I would if I thought about it, but the things that stick out to me, my favorite moments, are either character related or story related. And they were usually from more downtime, because you had like this well-earned rest, and then you had this chance to kind of get to know somebody better. Those are what I'm there for, and I think that's true for the majority of gamers. But the perception, as you mentioned earlier, is, well, if it doesn't have something happening, if there's not somebody blowing up or a tit falling out every 5 minutes, then we're going to lose the player. And it's like, I wish you would consider maybe taking a step back from that, which almost goes full circle to what we started talking about. I don't want to go to the full point where we're going to interactive games over this, because I think the gunplay can be clunky sometimes, but it does make me stop and wonder.
Yeah.
I mean, I think back to Mass Effect 2, and some of the like you said, the things I remember the most is Morden singing, and this is my favorite story in the Citadel. Like those are like the two things I remember the
Yeah,
most.
and you punch out a reporter, and like there's
Yeah.
these little moments, of course, that were a lot of people would say were their favorite from that series, right? But they stick out for a reason.
Yeah, not the gun battles.
Not, oh yeah, I shot that Harbinger 47 times and then he died, and I was like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I absolutely agree. So, like, Witcher 3 is like all time. It is a masterpiece. It's probably in my top 5, maybe higher game of all time. Cyberpunk is not going to reach that, but I very much enjoyed my time with it, and it reminds me of like the Deus Ex and the Dishonored and Skyrim, and I know they're a little bit different genres in there, but I get the same sort of feeling from those, and I've enjoyed it a lot.
It's interesting to me that the PS4 and Xbox One releases were so bad that it has tainted this entire game, even now.
Yeah.
Because even back at release, the PS5 and Xbox Series X versions were pretty much fine. They had their issues, like you said, but they were playable. They looked fine. They looked great graphically. And other than a handful of bugs, which, by the way, like Skyrim, a game I adored, was not glitch free. Sometimes I laughed at it, though. I'm with you. I'm not a big immersion guy, right? So all that's to say, like, Cyberpunk had its flaws at release, but its flaws have lingered even more than I expected because, you know, we just talked yesterday. That version, the last gen version, is $10. It has been 9 months.
Yeah.
And that game is $10. And a game like that would never drop in price that quickly unless it was just horrendously flawed. So for on the next gen systems was what you have, or for PC where, you know, some fixes came pretty quickly, seems fine.
Dave, I didn't know you were interested in it. I would probably recommend it to you, especially now, like on the PS5. Don't go back.
No.
But in a real quick shout out, you might be interested in Resident Evil 8. And I only say that because it seems to be like the spiritual sequel to Resident Evil 4. There's kind of like that setting a little bit. There's the economy system that's back again that hasn't really been in there for a while. So,
whereas Resident Evil 6 was the spiritual sequel to Satan's Asshole.
Yeah, not great for a lot of ways. I don't know what they did.
I want to say I played that one and it was pretty bad.
But you know what? Credit to them for getting back on track, because as we've seen, and we were talking about this on a call the other day that Dave wasn't there for, but like when franchises go wrong, sometimes they don't have the chance to go back to right.
Yeah.
We'll see with Mass Effect. That's a prominent example right now because, you know, Mass Effect 3 was 12 years ago. So other than Andromeda, what do we have? And don't talk to me about BioWare's other releases because that track record's not great either, right? So in this case, you know, Resident Evil lost sight of itself, 6 and even parts of 7, I would argue, but 8 seems to be what people want from the series, so good on them.
Yep.
I'm not going to spend a lot of time on my list.
Okay.
Because A, it sounds like Cody's back on track to be here on time, and B, I haven't been playing a lot lately. It turns out that as coronavirus comes back, but the world is still continuing on as normal, that there's not a lot of time to do things on the side because there's just stories constantly. Never
Chris,
not stories.
The world is normal.
It
you
is
just
normal,
said it yourself.
Yes. Right.
This is the new normal.
Ah.
Texas governor got COVID today, and exactly 0 people were shocked by that.
Yeah. And why would we be?
He was just at a gathering the night before with 1,000+ people in a room unmasked, and a lot of them are old.
Contact tracing on that one.
Anyways, we won't talk about that here. It's supposed to be an escape from that, right? The things I did play recently were Crackdown 3. So, you know, I'm playing the cutting edge. Let's be honest, I'm just doing it because of Game Pass. So I played Crackdown 3 because I never had an Xbox. And it was very much like Crackdown 2, except it had no excuse to be because it was like a decade later. So it was fine, but it was kind of showing its age. Reminded me of Final Fantasy 15 in a lot of ways, gameplay-wise, where it's like, oh, this started development a long time ago, and you can tell.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yep.
I played... I went through and played Fight Night Champion. I played the other Fight Nights. I loved 3 back in the day. Never got to play Champion, so I played that. It was fine. Again, that one was older.
Can I just tell you, Crackdown, my only memory from 1 is actually playing with you a little bit. That was kind of fun. Like, oh, I didn't know you could do this co-op. So that was kind of neat. Other than that, just climbing the biggest tower in the world, the game world, and then jumping off.
Yeah.
That was great, and that was really fun. But that's all I remember from the entire experience.
And that's about all you can do in 3 as well.
Okay.
Like, eventually you do get more powerful, and they've done a good job expanding on it to an extent. But at the end of the day, it's like you want to get better at doing things so you can do more things, and it does feel satisfying, but like the story is whatever, and you just kind of, you're a superhero, but it doesn't feel great. It still feels better than Saints Row 4, which is odd.
Oh.
Beyond that, I mean, I've been playing Great Ace Attorney on the side and then with Michaela. And the only thing I've been really doing with my spare time is I got the month free trial of Disney Plus, and I'm going through all 3 Marvel shows. And by going through, I mean I just finished.
Oh, okay. I didn't think you were done with Loki yet.
Just finished it.
So what is your favorite?
Here's where I go super controversial.
Okay.
Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Interesting. Why?
Because it, of all the 3 series, it did what I wanted to most post-Avengers, which is explore what the fuck happened after half the world disappeared.
Yep.
Spoiler.
Yep.
And I thought it did it in a really grounded and believable way. Now, here's the one thing I wanted to say about this, because I don't want to really talk about the 3 shows. They're all old news at this point. I think I benefited from binging that show. That show, unlike WandaVision and Thor, didn't really have episode-to-episode hooks.
It was like a one big movie, in a way.
Yeah. So I can imagine for folks who were watching that on a weekly basis, it was probably a little bit more frustrating. Like, yes, they have the new fake Captain America at the end of episode 1, and you go, ooh, what's that about, right? But it doesn't have this intrigue like almost every episode of WandaVision and most of the Thor Loki episodes where you're like, oh, like what the hell does that mean? What's going on, right? So in some ways, maybe I liked that more because I could binge it, and I wasn't stuck waiting 6 weeks for a story that probably seemed more plotting if you were waiting for it. I don't know. That's only my perspective on it. I binged all 3 because I waited till after they were all done. So maybe that's why. I liked all 3 quite a bit. You know, it's like 8.5 to 7.5 for the 3. But
I think that's so interesting that this is a thing that people and studios have to deal with now. And we did touch on it before of what we thought was better. But just the idea that, like, nowadays you can't even guarantee how someone is going to interact with your product. Like back in the day, you're watching Lost. I mean, yeah, I don't know if somebody buys it on DVD, then whatever. It's 6 months, a year later. But when it's being released, there's one way you're going to do it, and it's every week. And for the most part, that's it. And now, like, people, you wait like 2 months, and you can watch the whole thing at once. And it changes the dynamic of the show, like you said. Whereas, like, for me, Loki, I actually enjoyed the most because I thought storytelling-wise, it was the strongest. But you're absolutely right. Actually, the Falcon Winter Soldier show was even going to go more into exploring it. There was a pandemic that they were going to have in there that they were like, we might want to cut this now. So
it looked you on the nose.
It would have been fascinating though, because they were basically saying there was like a disease that didn't really matter until everybody came back, and now the overpopulation made it spread rampantly.
Mm-hmm.
Could have been cool, but I get why they didn't want that in there.
Yeah, and it was still a strong enough hook without it because overpopulation is still a problem for this world, so it still can resonate to a certain extent. And I mean, look, WandaVision did touch on it to an extent, but really only in Wanda's aftermath, and I guess a couple other characters as far as what the snap meant. But that was the one that I thought really did it well. Whereas, like, Loki didn't even need to deal with it because it was its own byproduct and it's setting up this whole multiverse stuff. But I don't know. I think I liked it the most. And maybe that was just an enjoyment thing. Would I say, like, Falcon and the Winter Soldier was the best? Probably not, but it's the one I liked the most.
Well, I will say, I've established that Loki's my favorite. The Falcon show was the only one I got, like, emotional over at any point. I thought Loki was cool as hell, but I was never like, oh my God, I'm on the verge of tears. But there was a couple different moments in the Winter Soldier, like Isaiah Bradley and all his shit that he had to deal with, and just like the moment of Sam Wilson actually taking over as Captain America was just like great stuff. So, and
we even talked about this, as much as I think Black Panther went a long way for people that didn't see themselves represented on the screen in a way that I'll never understand. To me, I would think that this would resonate more so.
Yeah.
With a lot of different people. Like, it was cool to get that representation in Black Panther, but this was almost speaking to issues that people of color have run into in this country.
Yeah.
And good on them for tackling that in a complex but still interesting way.
I think, like, you could put it, the lows are lower, but the highs were higher for me in that show. And so it was really good. Yeah. I've liked them all so far. A common critique of them is like, oh, this is it's so meaningless because the next Captain America movie is just going to have Sam Wilson as the winner, as Captain America. And like, you didn't need to watch this show to get there. And I was like, yeah, but now we have all the backstory, all the context, and like fleshing it out. And like, it's great. I think it's a really good strategy by them getting away with about the most that they can for a TV disconnected thing.
Yep. And I care so much more about this than I ever did like an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or something.
Yeah.
Because they're characters that I like, and I want to see them interact. Guess what? It harkens back to what we just talked about in video games. I like the time that we have with this quiet. So, I mean, there's actually action and all this stuff going on, but like, I enjoy the fact that they have this downtime and they get to know each other better and they become more like friends. Yeah. And it's because I don't want every movie to be the Avengers. I love the Avengers movies. They're great, but they're the payoff and the culmination of everything else that builds to that moment. You can't just be all Avengers all the time, which is why I think WandaVision got kind of screwed being the first one to air, because people were looking for something from it that it wasn't going to be. Because I was interested week to week. Like, I know there wasn't a lot that happened in the first couple episodes especially, but it's like they're building something here. Just give it some time.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need, now we're going to snap the whole universe, not just, hey, it's like, we don't need, sometimes smaller stakes are much more compelling.
Yep. Which I think Falcom and Winter Soldier did best.
Yeah. Cool.
I didn't much stand that one, sorry.
I know, but
you don't watch any of this, but I'm glad Chris has made his way through it. I think it's really, really solid stuff.
It was overdue. And all three were quite good. We don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but we had to at least bring up a couple of NBA points. First of all, fuck Pat Beverly.
I made me so happy when I saw this morning he got traded to Minnesota.
Again, the twice.
Because so Landry Shamet was like rally the valley, which I thought was really nice, and he was like, chill, bro. Like, tweeted at Pat Beverly tweeted at Landry Shamet, like, just chill.
And for the benefit of our listeners who are usually not as big of an NBA fan as we are, keep in mind that this is the same Pat Beverly who jumped up on a table at a restaurant when the Paul George Kawhi Leonard moves were announced and shouted that he was going to win the title, which he did not, and now he's gone.
Yeah, that whole that crew, all gone.
Landry Shamet just does a tweet that's kind of just on brand and smart, but it's still kind of a nice moment. Like you said, just a little thing, but cool. And he's over. He gives that reaction to that when he pulled that shit.
And then he gets traded. And then he gets traded again. Mm-hmm. Because no one wants Patrick Beverly. And I like to think it's because of his character, not because of his talent. But I know he's not really offensively. He's a nothing. So that's probably has more to do with it.
I love the fact that I looked up Pat Beverly's Twitter, and when he tweeted Landry Shamet stupid, and then tweeted grit and grind, let's go, which is the nickname for the Memphis Grizzlies, grit and grind. And then immediately it's just that tweet's worthless. And then he says he responded to someone's report that said Patrick Beverly is reportedly happy with the trade to the Timberwolves. And he says, extremely excited, let's go. Like, dude, you're just you're just throwing shit out there. Like, for someone that claims to be so real and hard and everything, he just seems so fake.
Yep.
Which is probably true of a lot of people. We've documented LeBron to death at this point, but, and at the same time, as much as I hate him and I'm glad, he's getting thrown around the league like a used Band-Aid. That's not a really good metaphor.
Yeah,
it's
maybe.
Fine.
I can kind of see it.
Nobody really...
As much as that's happening, like, I also have to cut him some slack, because what's he supposed to do? Be like, oh, fuck, I'm going to Minnesota? Like, you can't do that. So he's got to have to roll the punches as best he can, Now, all that said, screw him, and I hope he languishes away to death there. But that's the one thing where I was like, yeah, he kind of has to. He can't be like, I don't want to go to the Timberwolves.
Well, to your point, though, that's why you don't get on other players for doing the same thing you did.
Yeah.
Have some foresight.
No.
So anyways, yeah, fuck him. That's great. I actually... I don't know why, and I'm not a scout, and whatever. From a Suns perspective, I love that. I am much less afraid of the Clippers now because for whatever reason, Bev shut down Booker. And I think it's because he is dirty and he was getting away with shit, but he was getting away with it. If he didn't get away with it, that'd be another story, but he was. And without that, I am less afraid of the Clippers than I was 10 days ago.
I feel like the Clippers made a trade that made them worse. And it's weird to me because I don't know, like they don't seem like a threat to me in the West this year.
That tells me that they don't think Kawhi's coming back.
Yep.
That tells me that they know this is a lost cause and they didn't want to pay a massive luxury tax bill because they save a ton of money by making this deal. So I think that's why. And, on the off chance Kawhi exceeds expectations and comes back early, maybe they can still make a run because they still have their nucleus and, they're still pretty good. But that to me screamed like, we don't think Kawhi's coming back. We know he's notorious for taking his time. So we might as well punt
next year,
this
though,
season.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
Yeah, he'll
that
be
injury, considering when he had the surgery done, he should be done, I think, the entire season. I don't think there's a chance he plays.
Yep.
Even if he wasn't Kawhi, I don't think there's a chance he plays. Because he is Kawhi, do we even see him before opening night of 2 years from now?
I mean, that's the same thing we thought of Klay Thompson. We think Klay Thompson's this type of warrior, but that was an unintentional pun.
Yeah.
But he didn't come back from his torn ACL at all. Granted, the Warriors weren't great that year, but still he didn't come back at all, and then tore his Achilles and was out for another year. But
yeah, and we talked about the Warriors as this prospective like dark horse contender. The more I'm reading about it, the more they're not even sure Klay's going to start this season.
Whew.
Wow.
I mean, he's coming back from 2 pretty catastrophic injuries, so it makes sense when you think about it. But our assumption all along is like, well, yeah, but he'll be ready for this regular season, and then it seems like it's a coin flip right now.
Well, I guess the problem that I'm having is when Kevin Durant comes back, you're like, well, Kevin Durant at 50, 60% while he eases his way in, it's going to be fine. He's taller. He can shoot. Klay, I feel like, relies on a lot of mobility to get open shots, both on offense and defense, to be that excellent defender that he is. Mm-hmm. So if he's not able to return to those, Klay at 50 to 60% you're not talking about the same thing as like a Durant.
Nope. And we've seen what happens when Steph Curry has to lead the team. I mean, he can do it. He can win them some games and get close to the playoffs. But, that team is scheduled to play the Suns on Christmas Day. It's going to be a really different game if Klay Thompson's not on the team.
Yep, and we'll see how that goes. I mean, we were almost certain to be in a Christmas Day game because we were a finalist, and sure enough, there's a lot of interesting matchups then. The opening night games are interesting. It starts in about 2 months, so already like Summer League is effectively over, and nobody really cared about that anyways. But all of a sudden, about a month's time from now, it'll be almost preseason, and we're going to have to start ramping up our expectations again.
So, hold on. We're not going to break down Jalen Smith's Summer League games?
No.
Because I didn't watch.
Is there even, what's a one word? Disappointing, I would say, probably, although I know he picked it up a little bit as it near to close, but
I think it was an issue more of the team itself, which was trash, and the fact that he's a big, so he's not really going to be creating his own shots all that often. Rebounding looked great. I mean, there were some flashes, and he had one really good game, but at this point, he's either going to make the team and then hopefully get a chance to develop, or he's going to get packaged with Saric and go for something. I don't know what. Thad Young. I don't know.
I saw a trade today that was like him and Jay Crowder and Cam Johnson for Brandon Ingram, which I was like, no, this is stupid. This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen.
That's not happening.
That is not.
And it was like 4 pick swap. I saw that same thing. It was like 4 pick swaps too. I'm like, nope.
Yeah, that's why. Normally I ignore stuff like that, but this one seemed to have a little bit, like a tad more credibility. Although I'm sure it's still, there's no way James Jones would even consider something like that.
Yeah.
We don't need a Brandon Ingram. I'm sorry.
Are we concerned at all that we haven't filled out that last roster spot with the rest of our available cash?
No. Especially not with at least Millsap still on the board.
Yeah.
Like Iguodala's gone. We mentioned him as one person we might like. You sign Paul Millsap for the rest of the MLE, and I'm perfectly content.
Yep, I am too. I just hope someone else would snap him up. I don't know, maybe we're waiting for the buyout market or something.
Yeah, you can wait for that as well, because we don't exactly have a lot of flexibility, other than like Tyshawn Alexander. There's not a lot of roster space for potential moves about people you could lose without being sad about it. So I don't mind being patient because we certainly don't need anybody in August.
Yeah, it's the end of the season. It's May and June when we need them.
Mm-hmm. I hope Millsap comes here.
I'm feeling good about everything. I think we added a couple nice pieces, and I'm disappointed about Saric, obviously. Yep. But that was a known it's not like he got hurt in the summer or something. We knew that was a reality, and I think we did pretty good in getting a replacement for him.
Basically, if Jalen Smith can become a serviceable backup in this league, we're gonna have a better team than last year, I think.
Oh yeah,
that's a good sign.
Or if Cam Johnson adds 10 pounds of muscle and can really play a small ball 4 effectively alongside Crowder. Yep. That could get the job done. It's like you're going to need somebody else against the big teams. But, even the Lakers at this point, we were worried about them because of Davis and X, right? Gasol or whomever. And now, I mean, they've sort of downsized as well with this roster construction. If you're going to play Westbrook, you can't play a traditional big without just completely collapsing your spacing.
Yep.
So who are we then scared of? Who are the other big teams in the NBA at this point?
And if Cam can, like we said, improve a little bit, put on that muscle, Johnson. I mean, I still think you start Crowder, and if he's hitting, he's usually pretty transparent of like he's either going to go crazy or he's going to be completely off, and it normally lasts the entire game. He'll occasionally hit like one big shot in the fourth, but that'll be like his one for like 12 for the game. And in that, if he's having a game like that, you're swapping Cam, and if he can play to that level, don't start him. I don't think, but maybe he ends up even playing more minutes that night, and that's fine.
Yep. So yeah, there's been some other stuff, but that's the big ones. We had to get Pat Beverly out there because he couldn't help but laugh at that. And hey, Suns are actually slated for relevant time slots. It's going to happen all season. I mean, they added a lot of national broadcasts last year when we started to be good, but now we're going to be out there from the word go. I don't think we're on the opener, but we play the Lakers in game 2, I think.
We are national TV for the opener against the Nuggets, and then Lakers game 2 national TV as well.
Yep.
So both, I think the first 2 games are both on ESPN to start the season against the Nuggets and Lakers. I'm very excited for that, to see that Lakers Suns game. I think it'll be
Is Jamal
intriguing.
Murray? Do we know? Speaking of Klay Thompson, like what's Jamal Murray?
I think halfway through the season is projected, but we don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, I said like a month or 2 last time, and then I was thinking about the timing of it, especially with how late the season ran, and I'm like, yeah, he might not be back until close to the playoffs.
And who knows what it'll be at that point,
Yep. Because again, it's a type of injury you can't really afford to fuck around with.
Well, yeah, and you don't want to. So even if he comes back after waiting, you don't want to then play him, 35, 40 minutes a game like you so commonly would in the playoffs, because that's just begging for injury again. So,
yep.
I don't know, man. It's wild.
That's why, I mean, charge hurts, obviously, but Chris Paul, you'd like to think, like, the wrist thing sucked, but that's a thing you can work through, right? You're not worried about if he makes a certain basketball move, his wrist is going to fall off, like you are with all these leg injuries that, unfortunately, the rest of the league is suffering with.
Yep.
So, unless somebody slaps his hand. But guess what? He's going to see Pat Beverly at least one fewer time this season. So, yeah, that'll help.
Yeah.
And not the playoffs.
Wow.
Likely.
But that's fair, yeah. But wow. Alrighty, well, that is the end of this episode. Thank you for listening to our hodgepodge. We are only now basically 5 away from 500. It's coming up. Next week is number 496. Don't know what the topics are yet, but we'll figure it out when we get there. And as always, thank you for being along for the ride. In between episodes, you can find us at our website, objectionnetwork.com, or youtube.com/objectionnetwork for new videos 7 days a week, including Ace Attorney. Please watch us. There's objections.